Claire Matthews did not expect the knock that afternoon. And that was why it unsettled her so deeply. Because her life had become predictable in a way that felt safe, but empty. Shaped by quiet mornings, careful routines, and the steady belief that surprises were no longer meant for her, especially not emotional ones. The Sunday light rested gently across her living room, highlighting framed photos from years ago. Reminders of friendships that had endured even as her marriage had not. And she was halfway through sorting old mail when the doorbell rang. Sharp and sudden, cutting through the calm she had built around herself. For a moment she considered ignoring it, assuming it was a delivery or a neighbor. But something in her chest tightened, urging her to answer. When she opened the door, she found Ethan Walker standing there, holding a neatly wrapped gift in both hands, his posture polite but uncertain, as if he had practiced this moment and still wasn't sure how it would go. Claire recognized him instantly, not as the boy she had once known, but as the man he had become, taller, composed, with a seriousness in his eyes that caught her off guard. Ethan was her closest friend, Linda's son, someone she had watched grow up through school events, holidays, and long conversations at the kitchen table years ago, yet seeing him now felt strangely unfamiliar. Like meeting someone new who carried pieces of a familiar past. He smiled, but it wasn't casual, and when he spoke, his voice carried a careful respect that made Claire straighten without realizing it. He explained that Linda had asked him to stop by with something for her, that it wasn't urgent but important. And he extended the gift as if it weighed more than it looked. Claire accepted it with a soft laugh, trying to keep the moment light. But her curiosity grew when she noticed Ethan didn't immediately step back or turn away. Instead, he lingered, on the porch, glancing at her as though measuring his words. And in that pause, Claire sensed there was more behind this visit than a simple delivery. She invited him inside out of habit and kindness. And they stood awkwardly near the doorway, exchanging small talk about Linda, work, and the weather. Yet, beneath those ordinary words ran a quiet tension that Claire could not name. She noticed how attentive Ethan was, how he listened closely, how his eyes reflected something thoughtful and restrained. And it made her aware of herself in a way she hadn't felt in years, not flattered exactly, but seen. When he finally said he should go, there was a brief hesitation, as if he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. Choosing instead to wish her a good afternoon before stepping back into the sunlight. Claire watched him walk down the path, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. And when she closed the door, the house felt different, no longer as quiet as before. She stood still for a moment, holding the gift, her heart beating faster for reasons she didn't fully understand. And she told herself it was nothing, just an unexpected visit stirring old memories. Yet, as she carried the box to the kitchen, she sensed that this moment would not fade easily, that something had shifted even before the gift was opened. Claire set it on the table and stared at it, thinking of how long it had been since anyone had brought her something without an occasion, without expectation, and she wondered why this simple act felt heavier than it should. Outside, the afternoon moved on like any other. But inside her home and inside her thoughts, a quiet door had already opened, hinting that the knock she answered was not the real beginning, but only the surface of something deeper, waiting to be revealed. Claire sat at the kitchen table long after the door had closed behind Ethan, the wrapped gift resting in front of her like a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Because some part of her sensed that opening it would shift, something she had carefully kept steady. The room was quiet except for the ticking clock, and she told herself she was overthinking, that it was likely just a small token from Linda. Maybe a book or something thoughtful, nothing more. Still, her hands moved slowly as she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, revealing a leather-bound notebook, simple but elegant. The kind chosen with care rather than speed. The weight of it surprised her, not heavy in her hands, but in meaning. And when she opened it, A folded letter slipped out and landed softly on the table, changing the air in the room. Claire knew at once the handwriting was not Linda's, and her breath caught as she unfolded the page, her eyes drawn to the neat lines that spoke with honesty rather than drama. The letter began with gratitude, reminding her of a time years ago when Ethan had struggled during college, feeling lost and unsure, and how she had listened without judgment, offering calm advice when he felt he had no direction. As she read, Claire remembered those late conversations, how she had thought nothing of them at the time, believing kindness was just part of who she was, never considering that her words might have left such a deep mark. The letter continued, explaining that those moments had stayed with Ethan, shaping the way he saw himself and the way he approached life. And Claire felt a quiet ache in her chest as she realized how rarely people tell you the impact you've had on them. Then the tone shifted not into anything bold or demanding, but into something careful and sincere, as Ethan admitted that his respect had grown into admiration, and his admiration into feelings he had tried to understand rather than ignore. He wrote that he had never planned to share this, that he understood the complexity of their connection, and that he carried no expectations. Only the belief that honesty, when offered gently, could be a gift rather than a burden. Claire paused, her fingers resting on the paper, her thoughts racing ahead of her emotions because part of her wanted to dismiss it as impossible, inappropriate, and yet another part recognized the quiet truth in his words. She had felt something. 2 moments of warmth during their conversations, a sense of being understood at a time when her own marriage had been slowly fading. Feelings she had pushed aside without naming. Reading the letter forced her to face what she had avoided, not because it was wrong, but because it was complicated, and that made it harder to ignore. Ethan's words did not cross any line, did not ask for anything, and that restraint made them more powerful because they respected her boundaries while still revealing his heart. He ended the letter by saying he would understand if she chose silence, that he would never bring it up again unless she wished to, and that his only hope was that she would know how much she had mattered to him. Claire folded the letter carefully and set it beside the notebook, her hands trembling not with fear but with recognition, as if a hidden truth had been named and could no longer be unseen. She closed the notebook without reading further, feeling overwhelmed yet strangely calm, aware that this gift was more than an object. It was a mirror reflecting parts of herself she had forgotten. Sitting there, Claire looked around her kitchen, the same space where she had once shared laughter and arguments, joy and disappointment. And she understood that the past had shaped her, but it had not ended her story. The letter had opened a door she had locked for safety, and while she didn't know if she would step through it, she knew she could no longer pretend it wasn't there. Because some gifts arrive not to change your life instantly, but to remind you that your heart is still capable of feeling, even when you believed it had already learned everything it needed to know. The days after Claire read the letter passed quickly on the surface, but slowly in her thoughts. Because every quiet moment brought Ethan's words back to her, not as pressure, but as a soft presence she could not ignore. She tried to stay busy, answering emails, meeting friends, and convincing herself that time would smooth everything out. Yet when Linda invited her for coffee, Claire felt a tight pull in her chest, sensing that this meeting might bring clarity or confusion, or both. The cafe was warm and familiar, filled with low conversation and the smell of fresh coffee. And Claire relaxed slightly when she saw Linda smiling at a corner table. But that calm faded when she noticed Ethan already there, sitting with his hands wrapped around his cup, looking thoughtful rather than surprised to see her. Linda chatted easily at first, speaking about everyday things, but Claire soon realized this was no accident. Because after a few minutes, Linda checked her phone, apologized with a knowing smile, and stepped away, leaving Claire and Ethan alone, without explanation. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was full, and Ethan was the first to speak. His voice steady as he apologized if his letter had caused her any distress, making it clear he never wanted to place weight on her heart. Claire appreciated his honesty and told him she had not felt upset, only surprised because his words had touched parts of her she had not expected to feel again. She explained that her life had changed in ways she was still learning to accept, and that opening herself to new emotions felt both hopeful and frightening. Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression respectful and calm, and when he spoke again, he said he understood her concerns, that he valued her peace more than his own feelings, and that he would never push for something that felt wrong to her. Claire felt a mix of relief and sadness because his patience made the connection feel genuine rather than careless. And that sincerity made her consider him differently than she ever had before. She spoke about her past, about the slow end of her marriage, about the trust she had rebuilt piece by piece, and how careful she had become with her heart, not out of bitterness, but wisdom. Ethan nodded, sharing that he had spent years finding his own direction, learning when to speak and when to remain silent, and that writing the letter had been his way of choosing honesty without expectation. As the conversation continued, the tension softened into understanding, and Claire realized that this moment was not about deciding anything, but about acknowledging what already existed. There were no promises made, no plans suggested, only mutual respect and a shared awareness that some connections do not need to be rushed to be real. When they finally stood to leave, Ethan thanked her for listening and said that, regardless of what came next, he was grateful for her presence in his life. Claire replied with a gentle smile, telling him she appreciated his courage and his kindness, and as they walked out of the cafe together, she noticed how natural it felt to be beside him, not as a woman searching for answers, but as someone being seen for who she was. Outside, they paused briefly, the afternoon light soft around them, and Claire felt a quiet shift inside herself, understanding that even without certainty, something important had been shared. As they went their separate ways, Claire carried with her not confusion, but a calm sense of truth, knowing that whatever path she chose, this honest conversation had given her something rare, the freedom to feel without fear and the comfort of knowing that respect, when it leads the way, can make even the most uncertain moments feel meaningful. Weeks passed since the cafe meeting, and Claire found herself drawn again to the notebook Ethan had given her, a quiet companion that now felt less like a gift and more like a mirror reflecting thoughts she had long kept hidden from herself. Because each page seemed to invite honesty, both about him and about her own heart. And the act of writing became a ritual she could not ignore. She sat at her kitchen table one evening, the golden light from the sunset spilling across the room, and picked up a pen, letting her thoughts flow onto the empty pages, starting with gratitude for the connection they shared, then moving into memories she had tucked away, conversations with Ethan years ago, moments of laughter and quiet comfort, small kindnesses that now seemed profound in retrospect. Writing felt like breathing. Each word released the weight she had carried silently, and she realized the gift had never been about a simple gesture, but about permission to feel again, to acknowledge that life could surprise her with quiet, unexpected warmth. As she wrote, she remembered Ethan's patience, his respect, and how it had allowed her to process feelings she had thought were long gone. And she smiled at the memory of his calm presence, realizing that sometimes love does not demand fireworks, but grows in subtle, steady ways. Over the following days, Claire began to notice small changes in herself. She walked with a lighter step, spoke with more openness to friends, and allowed herself moments of quiet reflection without guilt or fear, because the notebook had reminded her that feelings, once acknowledged, need not control her, but could enrich her life if treated with care. Occasionally, she saw Ethan when visiting Linda, and each encounter was measured yet full of warmth, with conversations that flowed naturally, never rushed, never forced, and she understood that meaningful connections are not always about dramatic gestures, but about presence, trust, and gentle understanding. One afternoon, as she wrote in the notebook again, she realized that what had come with the gift was not a promise of romance, nor a question of what should happen next, but a deeper awareness that her heart was capable of hope and resilience, that emotions could be welcomed rather than feared, and that human connections, when built on respect and honesty, can open doors to growth she had not anticipated. Claire's evenings were no longer lonely. She found herself reflecting on past choices, forgiving herself for mistakes, and appreciating the small joys around her the way sunlight hit her windows. The sound of birds in the garden, the quiet satisfaction of finishing a page in her notebook hand. She noticed that her life felt richer simply because she allowed herself to feel. As winter approached, Claire felt a steady warmth in her chest when she thought of Ethan, not as a distraction, but as a reminder that the world still held moments of sincerity and care, and that relationships could carry depth without urgency, without complication, simply by being genuine. The notebook became a testament to her journey, a place where she documented not only her feelings for Ethan, but her own growth, her reflections on past heartbreak, and her hopes for the future, creating a space where clarity replaced confusion and self-understanding replaced doubt. On a quiet evening, she placed the notebook on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. And she realized with a smile that the greatest gift had not been the notebook or the letter, nor Ethan's careful honesty, but the courage they had sparked in her to embrace her own heart again, to trust in feeling without fear, and to understand that love and connection come in many forms, often quietly, patiently, and unexpectedly, shaping life in ways both profound and gentle. The gift she understood fully now had awakened something she thought she had lost. And as she closed the notebook, she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the story was hers to write, and that sometimes the most powerful gifts are not tangible objects but the emotions, awareness, and hope they inspire, leaving her with a quiet joy that filled her home and heart alike. A joy that whispered that life still held surprises worth noticing.